All right, let's talk about the fundamentals of data privacy. Um, in general, we all agree as a team already, data is one of the most critical assets in many organizations. As a matter of fact, I dare to say also in our recent world, a company like Bloomberg, this Michael Bloomberg is probably worth 50 something billion dollars, right? Bloomberg Incorporation, they are huge in data. Google is a $1 trillion plus company, huge in data. Facebook, the same thing, huge in data, right? So it means there's a correlation, Twitter, the same thing, correlation between data and wealth at this point in our world, really. In the past, the previous generation, it's mostly around we're manufacturing things, natural resources, right? But right now we're saying, just give me data. Let me control data, and I will be cutting the shot in any part of the world. There's a reason the richest man in the world, I think it's still Elon Musk, decided to buy Twitter, right? It's not stupid. It doesn't just feel like throwing his money around. But if you can control the narrative, then it means you're going to be around for a long time. As simple as that. All right. So data privacy is the set of concepts in general that works to define data as sensitive and subject to protection around regulation. That's why if you are based in the European Union country, there are a set of laws that must be followed if you are processing data from any European Union national. It has to be following the GDPR model, or else you're going to be subject to heavy fines and regulation. In the US, a state of like California has very stringent rules around privacy too. They have CCPA, I believe. Washington has similar one, and most states are adopting a similar model to ensure the privacy of their citizens are properly protected. And overall, somebody said Chicago has, yes, Chicago is also a big one. So Illinois has a similar model also. And many times the operation revolve around how is the data collected, used, shared, and when we say share, what are the ramifications around sharing with third-party vendors too? Because when you share, it does not make you less liable. You are equally liable also, right? So an organization may adopt various different data management practices on how they would organize and define their data. So every organization will be different, but the fundamentals are going to be very, very similar. So the concept of data privacy, how do we do data protection, then the security around the data, then how do we handle sensitive data within our organization too. Every one of these are huge, huge conversation we have to constantly have as a business, because it takes only one incident to really embarrass the biggest of organization in the world, right? So it's a big deal. That's why the topic is a hot topic. you know um, Most practically, let's think about the privacy concern. It revolves mostly around how data is shared within our organization, within our third party vendors or partners. How is our data collected or stored legally? It's not enough to just collect our data. How is it stored? How is the collection process? Is it secured? Then what are the regulations restricting the way our data is used also? So in summary, let us type real quick, everybody. Let's say, how is our data stored? How is it shared? And what are the regulations? Let's type that real quick. How is our data stored? Let's go, everybody. Let's say, how is data stored? How is data stored? How is it shared? And the regulation around it. Let's go. And for those of us that joined late, we try to make it as collaborative as possible. So feel free, just, we'd like you to just type a little bit too. And it's important because it gets it a little bit to stick. The way I'm looking at this, my vision is simple. I'm looking at you, ladies and gentlemen, you're in a boardroom, you're speaking with your leadership, and in your mind, you're telling them, all right, guys, how is the data collected? How is it shared? How are you guys storing it? What are the regulations around the data? Even if you have an interview and you're making those kind of conversation, people will get comfortable that you understand the key risk involved in how your data is actually collected, because it's so important. If you're just collecting data without being thoughtful about it, if you're sharing data without being thoughtful, I'm not sure those of you that follow the news, a couple of times in Capitol Hill, the guys that are in social media, this C-level executive, they've been summoned to the Capitol Hill a couple of times, and they asked them specifically, how do you store the data of the customers? How do you share the data of the customer? Do the customers opt in before you collect or share their data? Then they will tell you that, well, we have this fine print written when you sign up for Facebook. They will tell you, well, we could also share with our third-party partners, something like that, right? And guess what? How many of us try to open a Facebook account or Google account and start reading all of the fine print of their contract? We are probably not doing it, right? Nobody's doing it. Maybe a few of us that are lawyers would do that, but historically, a lot of us would not do that. But those fine prints are there, and they state clearly they will share your data with third-party vendors. Sorry, but that's the reality. Our data is mostly being shared with third-party vendors. So that's why at times you get some promotional information, you get some calls, because technically our data has been shared. Now, and the truth is that how many of us have time to start chasing them around and say, why are you sharing my data? I'd rather move on with my life than making it a big deal. And they understand that. But it's a real big deal, and that's our new normal. Now, if you remember earlier on, I said there are 3 states of data. Let's try and be smart again. Let's go. You guys are going to be tired of this. But I'm telling you, if you make this a mindset around data, you're going to be one of the smart folks in the room in terms of your thinking. So let's go again. We're going to say data at rest. Let's start real quick, everybody, again. Data at rest, data in transit, data in use. Let's go. Let's go again. Data. Let's go. Everybody, let's go. Just type it. Data at rest, data in transit, and data in use. Very important. Let's go again, everybody. Let's go. There's power in repetition, by the way, because these are the things I know in a conversation. If you use a term like this, people will get comfortable that you understand the concept. Because at the end of the day, we're not complicating anything. Think about it. You are sending me information through email. Maybe you have an attachment that is important, an invoice that is proprietary to our business. I want to make sure wherever you're keeping it, storing it, it's safe. Nobody can come and steal the data. I want to make sure when you transit it, it's going through encryption and it's secured. And I want to make sure when you are making changes, you're adding information to the invoice, that it's not stolen or manipulated in that process. So we can live with that at the minimum, right? Okay. All right, cool. Now be ready. I'm going to quiz you a little bit on data at rest, data in transit, and data in use. All right. So let me ask quick random quiz. If I am I have a database, I'm storing credit card information as a firm. I'm using Oracle database storing credit card information. What category is that? Somebody said PCI, payment card industry. Oh, but you are so smart. You're going way ahead of us. But let's keep it at data at rest for now. Excellent. Yeah, you're right. You get that right. Because at that point, the data is just static. It's not doing anything, right? Okay, let's take it a step further. I'm a teller at the bank, and I'm making some changes in real time and adjusting my customers' financial record because they just made a payment. I'm making changes to that. What is that? Data in use. Thank you. Awesome. You all are super cool. I love that. Okay, the final one. I need to send to corporates all the list of our customers that registered this week. So I need to send that information to the corporate office. What is that? I'm sending information to corporate. Data in transit. Thank you. Okay, let me sneak in. I want to cheat a little bit. As I'm sending the data to the corporate office, let's just think from the surface. What do you think we should consider? If I'm sending data to the corporate office, what do you think we should consider? Let's just think about it. Encryption. Let's give this Mr. John a round of applause. Excellent. Kerry, awesome. Thank you. Oinda, excellent. That is it. Yes. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. Think about it. If you're sending me files, Adebayo, you're awesome. If you're sending me files, in my mind, I'm thinking, Jide, awesome job. Shegun, excellent. Because in my mind, I'm saying, you know what? Is it encrypted? And believe it or not, this happens a lot. There are times people, for those of you, maybe you are buying a house, mortgage information. Sometimes your underwriter or your loan processor or anyone, the closer, they will, when they're doing settlement, they might send you your file and information through plain text. They will just send it to you through your regular email. Many times we don't pay attention to it, but in reality, they should not do that, to be honest. That is a huge, huge risk because we are talking of sensitive information, sensitive financial information. Sometimes they're your contract, they're social security information, they're financial record, they're your life, really. And at times they will send it through regular plain text. Yeah, we're just hoping that nobody compromised this email, right? But the truth is that compromise happens all the time. So it's always smart. I always call them out. I'll say, hey, folks, do you mind? Can you send it through a secured file transfer process? We call it FTP. Can we all type secured FTP? Let's go, everybody. Just a secure FTP. Let's do that together. Okay. So if you're, ask them, can you send it through a secure FTP? Let's type that together. FTP stands for file transfer protocol. And I'll tell you what that is real quick. It's just a means in which we can transfer our files through a secure means. So many times your documents, your attachments, you want to make sure it's going through a secure means of communication and transfer at the end of the day, really. So don't just say file transfer protocol alone. Insist, can you send it through a secure file transfer protocol? Most of them would understand that. And if they don't have one, they will tell you, we might encrypt it and encrypt your email and provide you a password. Okay. So sometimes, and I'm saying this from an interview point of view, somebody could ask you, what are your recommendations in terms of keeping file transfer secure? So I'll say, well, I want to make sure they use the secure FTP and there's appropriate encryption when they're sending the files. Okay, so let's make sure, in my head, again, I know you guys we are having fun, enjoying knowledge, but in my mind, I'm also thinking from an interview point of view. A lot of you on this call, you're going to be part of my GRC program coming up too. And in my head, I'm already thinking interview scenario. Somebody can potentially ask you this question in an interview scenario because ultimately the goal in the long term is have the skill, the knowledge to potentially get a job. I think that's the ultimate goal for us. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. And again, for those of you that have not registered for this particular program, please go and register because every one of this PowerPoint, the slide is provided there. In a bit, I will share let me just type it here just for the people that don't know where the access is. If you're on this call and you've not actually registered for this particular program, please feel free. Just go ahead and just do it. Let me just type it real quick. Not now, do it later, but just to let you know you have enough. All these materials will be there. Some of you have pinged me, am I sharing the PowerPoint? Everything is there. The class is available for you. We're gonna close the class probably a few weeks, but for now it's available, so just go ahead and enjoy it. It's pretty great field, really. All right, let's go. Let's go to the next one. Importance of data privacy. Let's think about this together. I think not to kill a dead horse already, it's a no-brainer because we know there are regulators watching us like crazy right now. We can't just get away with, gone are the days you can just mess up people's data and think things will be fine. No, regulators are chasing people crazy right now. So it's important to make sure Um, we have a clear process to collect, store, and process people's personal data. We have to have defined policies around data privacy also. Very, very important. Management must buy in. It's not just you making the noise of data privacy or data governance. You have to buy in. The leadership must buy in, or else it will be a disaster on its surface before even taking off. So leadership must buy in into your privacy strategy also. What are some steps to effective data privacy? Number one, we need to create a set of policies focused on achieving and maintaining those data privacy. The good thing is in our program, we typically would have a section where we build policies, and nobody's going to start from scratch. Always remember that. Most of the time, every one of these policies will be built with existing templates. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, it makes no sense to start from scratch, right? Because if you have solid templates already there, why do we need to start from scratch? Just utilize and leverage those templates as simple as possible. The other thing is that we have to have a solid identified data privacy officer or the equivalent. So big organization would have a data privacy officer. Some people call them general counsel, whatever they call them. The bottom line is that they are responsible for data privacy within your organization. Also, they should have a well-defined communication plan. How do we communicate all of this privacy need within the enterprise? Now, let's put it in perspective. If you work for an organization that is, some organizations are 50,000 people, some are 100,000 employees. That is some crazy stuff to deal with. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure for those of us that are entrepreneurs, you can really control 10 workers. So imagine somebody having 100,000 workers, that any of them, if they violate privacy laws, automatically rolls down to you as the chief privacy officer or the CEO, and it becomes a mess and a scandal for all of us. So it's so important. That's why you see people do security awareness training. They're always training people. When you see your organization always releasing training for you to train, don't get so mad or angry at times, because they understand that a violation is going to impact people beyond our imagination. And sometimes, guess what? The violation begins from the security post. If a security man that is not aware of security awareness start divulging personal information at the gates without being asked, or just giving out sensitive information that he or she should not know because they are not aware, then that is immediately beginning the compromise of your data from the onset. For example, I can come and do reverse engineering or social engineering and say, hey, I'm the CEO's friend. Do you mind? Can you link me with the CEO or give me his number? And out of my being friendly, the security guard gets a bit cozy and relaxed. And believe it or not, some of these security folks or your frontline that you first meet, they have so much knowledge of what's going on, situational awareness. Don't forget, they know the time the CEO always go back and forth. So they know information that most people would not never know. So it means privacy, cybersecurity protection begins from the front office, from the gate, from the receptionist, from everybody. It's everybody's responsibility. That's the moral of the story. Of course, there are some technical data security team also that are focused in building solution around data management, the enablers to use, and they have data owners identified. They are involved in classification of the data. So there are different roles within data too. There are folks that are data engineer, data scientists. So it's a lot of roles around data, yes. But in the overall governance side of things, you're just providing oversight to how data is being managed within your organization, as simple as that. Okay. Some general standards, that could be applicable, always remember, of course, the policies, the procedures, the standards, those are things we should always expect, even from your data governance program or data security program. What are some steps to protect data? Let's keep it simple. Um, you know, how do we protect data within an environment? Some basic things I would say for starters is always apply software updates. For example, many times if a company that you use their product request for us to update a software, it's always important to not dismiss it, because if you dismiss it, many times you realize that there's a reason why the update was made. So it's important to never dismiss updates within your environment. Password protection, it's a no-brainer, ladies and gentlemen. Always remember that password is a big deal for us. Encryption of the data, ensuring we can encrypt the data we are sending, backup of the data, ensuring we can have effective backup of data, control access, folks that have access to this data. How do we ensure that, you know, effectively we're controlling the access they have within our environment? Because at the end of the day, I was part of a team some years back. Um, a data breach was occurred, and we had to bring law enforcement in and FBI to do analytics with us. So I came in as, from the external consulting side of things, and we had to do forensic to start running tools to check the various areas that we suspected if there were any changes made in the process. So, and what we were trying to do was that, because this company was a chemical manufacturing, they had some sensitive folks that were in Asia. And at that point, they were the ones that had access to the intellectual property of the molecules, the compounds for this chemical company. So we had to be sure none of these PhD smart folks' access was violated. So it's a big deal. People take the effort, the time to ensure access is not violated. Data privacy versus data security in general. Many times around privacy, you will see activities around how data is collected, shared, and used. Around data security, it's mostly protecting the data from internal and external attack. I think those are the big things most of the time. We're protecting the data from internal or external attack, but the governance side is, okay, how is the data collected, stored, and used? How are we collecting, sharing, and using the data? That's the focus from a data privacy point of view. All right. Okay, let's move on a little bit. Some general pillars of information security in general. I think for those of us that have taken the fundamental program, sorry, give me. Okay. So some key pillars would have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. In simple terms, we are thinking the confidentiality is saying sensitive information is not reaching the wrong people. Integrity, ensuring the data maintains consistency, accuracy, and trustworthiness. The availability ensures that information is available when it is needed. Can we all type real quick? I know some of my folks that did the intro class kind of went through this. Can we all type CIA real quick? Everybody, let's go. CIA. Anytime people talk about cyber, one thing I'll tell you, if you always say CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data. Once you say that, most people really get the gist that you surely understand the concept, the key areas that are important within data security in general. So definitely data protection is always a force behind privacy. It's one thing to say, how is our data collected, stored, and used? But ultimately, if there's no security around the data, then everything will still fall apart anyway. So always remember that, okay? Let's get the fundamental of data governance in general. What is data governance? In general terms, it's just a broad term that refers to the organizational policies and procedure that governs data management. Let's take it again. What are the overall organizational policies and procedures that govern data management? Which is a huge deal at the end of the day. And why do companies need data governance? Number one, it helps to manage the ever-increasing volume of diverse data. Gone are the days that our data are just some structured data. There are so many unstructured data today. And those unstructured data would include your chatting data, your using of all this office tool data. So I was a part of a project some years back, and they used project tracking tool called Jira, right? Jira is just like your team today. People use it to chat, they can assign tasks, they can, they play around tasks and all that. Yeah. And the project was to sanitize Jira, all of our activities in Jira, to ensure there was no violation of PHI. PHI is personal health information, right? This is the healthcare industry. So we had to go in to start checking to make sure there was no reference to anything PHI, anything PII, personal identification information also. It took a long time because a lot of people, when you are doing the product development or system development, sometimes you bring information about people, anything PHI, PII, we had to filter it. It was a huge deal. It was a big project actually that we had to eventually do. One thing I would like us to take note of here, with data governance, there are key things that we have to eventually align with. At the end of the day, we have to think in terms of people, process, and technology. Can we all type it real quick, please? People, process, and technology. PPT. People, can we do that real quick, please? People, process, and technology. And let me tell you one thing. For those of us that are in consulting, you would appreciate this. If you are talking in any environment, leadership, and you say, I want to make sure we can maximize the potential from a people, process, technology point of view. You always sound smart anyway, anywhere you say it. Please make it like a live, way of chatting. If you are in leadership role, always tell them that, at the end of the day, we want to make sure the impact on people, process, and technology is taken care of, or we look at it from it's a popular, folks in consulting will know what I mean. It's like a buzzword we use a lot, people, process, technology, because everything ties to either one of those key things. It's either people driven, because at the end of the day, let me give an example. If I do a data security assessment and I want to check, and there's a gap simply means something that is probably not done, right? Or a missing piece within your organization. If I identify a gap, I must tie it to say, how does it impact people, the process, and technology within your environment? That makes it stand out all the time. Okay, so let's just take note of that. That's a pretty cool one. People use a lot. Some general things around, um, data governance. Number one, the protection, how reliable it is, how documented is it, how controlled is it, and how much of the evaluation has been done in general. So in general terms, data governance is the activity of managing data availability, the authenticity, the consumption, and security in cloud computing system to fulfill critical business objectives. So in general, because right now everybody would agree, cloud is like a big one in terms of most organizations today. So now if you're talking of data governance, you're not just thinking of your database alone, you're now thinking in terms of other piece of, infrastructure that holds the data. And in today's world, cloud happens to be like the big one right now for all of us. So all of us are in the cloud one way or the other. General objective of data governance, of course, increase the privacy and security of data. Access to sensitive data is regulated and monitored. The timely use of data analytics, obtaining and ensuring compliance with data privacy, and tracking data breaches within your organization also. Okay, those will be some general things in terms of data. Now let's talk about this real quick. This is a good one I would like to talk about a little bit. Data strategy. Data strategy. So in terms of data strategy itself, there are some key areas that I think are very, very important to kind of talk a little bit about. So top on the list, we'll see data management policy, data ownership, metadata management, data quality management, the architecture of the data. Every one of these forms a part of the overall strategy of data within your organization. Now, remember again, we might say Well, are you sure in terms of what kind of data is important to us? Yes. That's why many times we have to have ownership of the data. Who owns the data? If we have customer records that are important, that are sensitive information, the question is who owns that data? What about data quality management? If we have to deal with the quality of our data, who owns the quality of that data? Who is going to be responsible for it? What about the architecture, the way the structure of the data is? Who is responsible for it? What about the overall metadata, tagging the data management is? For those of us that use like Facebook, YouTube, you will see where they have tag. Sometimes you see them put a tag on a topic so that they can use it to recall information about the topic, right? If you're using Twitter, you see hashtag something relevant to the topic you're talking about, just to make it easy to classify those data, to optimize the performance of the data also. And this is some people's full-time career in general. Okay, but at the minimum, just have an idea of it. Okay, in terms of data, generally speaking, I have to think of the data ownership. So let's think together. I'm going to keep this diagram for a second. If you don't mind, can we just type it together? I want everybody to type that bubble you see there. Please just type something and I'll tell you what I want you to type. I want you to type in terms of data strategy, meaning the overall strategy for your data. We have to think who owns the data. Okay, let's type data ownership, everybody. Ownership. Let's type the architecture of the data. Let's type the quality of the data. I mean, quality is fair to say, right? Because I'm saying it's not just having data. Let's say quality. Let's say data quality also. Let's type quality of the data. Then let's say data management. How are you managing the data? That's fair. Then let's say meta data. All right, let's go. Everybody, let's go. Now, the reason I'm making you say do this is because if you're in an interview, you can easily tell somebody that, okay, typically from a data strategy point of view, I want to check who owns the data management, the quality of the data quality management. Then if they have a data management policy, then the metadata management, then the architecture. All right. And every one of these, again, you are not doing those roles, but it's just a good way to have a conversation that when I'm putting a data strategy together, every piece of this element should be part of it also. It's not just isolated as one. That's the gist of it, okay? All right, let's go. Why is data governance important? Again, I think we've said this many times. And earlier on before we got here, I told you guys to type some things around data strategy. Let's stick with those ones. These are some additional layer to it, but the ones we have earlier on should suffice because it still covers some of the details in general. And if we say those, I think it's fair to say in an interview, when you speak about data governance, data strategy, people will see that, oh, he or she gets it. You understand the concept of it. What am I saying? I'm thinking of data management. I'm thinking of data quality management. I'm thinking of data ownership, who owns the data. I'm thinking of the data architecture. How is the structure of the data defined, right? So those are the things in my head I'm thinking of in general. And that's great enough, really. Some general principles of data governance. Of course, we have to think of accountability. Can we all type something real quick? Let's type RACI, R-A-C-I, and I'll tell you what that is. Can we all type RACI, R-A-C-I, R-A-C-I? Let's go. RACI. Some of us have heard of it before. RACI means responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Please, can we type it all together? I just put it responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. RACI. And let me tell you what that is. Most of you have seen RACI before. You may not know that's what they call it. RACI chart is just showing chart of responsibility. Who is responsible for what? So in this team right now, all of us, we can put a RACI chart. In the RACI chart, you might say, who is responsible for training? You might say Skillweed instructor, whoever that is. Who is accountable for it? You might say accountability partner might be the manager in charge of, so a manager somewhere. Who is consulted? Everybody should be consulted. The students should be consulted when there's a class. We should send reminders. Who are the folks we are informing? We inform everybody there's a class coming. The students, outsiders, everybody, we inform them. So it's called a RACI chat. So sometimes you might hear people say RACI chat. Do you have a RACI chat? You know what? I think if you don't mind, it might be valuable. Let me show you guys what a RACI chat looks like. Again, my goal is to make everybody smarter, really. Let me quickly show you what a RACI chart looks like. For the purpose of folks that have never seen that before, and some folks tell me, oh man, I'm not IT, but let me show you. All of us have seen it somewhere. You may not know that's what they call it, but let me show you guys real quick. Let me share my screen. All right, let me share it again. Let's quickly share the screen. All right, let's go. So you guys will see, I just type RACI chat. So what RACI chat is just saying is that, okay, yeah, look at this, guys. This is the project leader. This is the guy's responsibility. You know, there are so many. It's just a fancy way of saying, okay, this is an easy one. You can see here, they define the activity, you know, bill of material. Then they put the name of the people responsible here. Then they will tell you who is accountable, who is responsible, who is consulted, who is informed. They kind of break it down. So this is what a RACI chart looks like, okay? And I wanted to stick that in because the same way, when we are doing data classification or data governance, we would identify the key players and break down the activities for them and tie it to who is responsible for what. For now, don't care. But if you find yourself in projects, sometimes they might ask you, can you help them with a RACI chart? Ladies and gentlemen, it's an easy thing, so don't stress it. Because what you're doing is simple. I'm going to have a meeting with your team. I know what the RACI chart is. I've put a sample together. You can use Excel for it. You can use anything, Word, whatever. It doesn't matter. And all I'm going to ask is, all right, ladies and gentlemen, tell me who is responsible for this task. They tell me, well, I think this should be your manager. Okay, I'll just put R, responsible. Who should we inform? Well, I think we should inform everybody. I'll put II for everybody. That's it. So but it's always valuable when we do RACI chat because you're adding value to your customers immediately when you do RACI chat. All right, let's continue. Let's go back here real quick. But I just wanted to share that so that we can see it in real time and it doesn't confuse us. Okay, let's go back. All right, so let's talk a little bit about assessment of doing data governance assessment. Now, for my regular class, we typically would do like a full assessment, and we use some examples that is really, really good, and you can see the kind of assessment we do, so that if you are doing an interview, you can easily give an example of an assessment you did, and that should suffice because people would relate with it. Oh, okay, this makes sense. You know, so let's take the first step. Review existing documentation of their current data management practice. So if I'm doing assessment and you give me your policy around data governance, or you tell me you don't have a policy, immediately I know that's a gap. You would agree with me, right? That, okay, there's a problem here. Don't let's waste our time. It's a gap already. We move on. Identify all the key stakeholders, business, technical. This number 2 is where sometimes we put in like a RACI, you know, conduct interview with the stakeholders. We just ask them questions, really. That's what it is. Sometimes you send them questionnaires, right? Number 3, we understand the data stewardship. Who owns the data? Now, one of the tough things I've seen in most organizations today is identifying owners of business processes. You'll be surprised that's one of the biggest things I've seen, really. Because a lot of people are like you and I. People already are doing their job. Most of us hate you to add more work for us, right? I mean, would you get to your office tomorrow and ask them, please add more work for me? Oh, I like you so much. Add more work. You know, it's rare, right? Most of us will not do that, right? But the truth is that it's one of the biggest challenge you would have, especially when you're asking who owns this process, who owns this data. You see people say, well, no, it's not me, it's that department. Oh, it's not, you know, it becomes a mess, really. But the gist is, we just don't like ownership most times because it will force you to be accountable. And everybody's trying to say, man, I'm already stressed with my job. Don't bring more stuff to me. So that's the gist about it. For access current state of data governance, I mean, it's easy to know if an environment has a fairly decent governance model. If they don't, you would also tell that, you know what, these guys don't have a structure in place. If you don't have policies and procedure, I know you're already messed up, really, in my mind. And I'm thinking more, okay, do they have their data classified? Do they know the owners of this different data? The answer is no. So in my head, I'm already saying, this is a disaster in the waiting. Okay. So of course, at the end of the day, we always recommend phased approach in terms of how they should implement data governance within the environment. You don't want to make it like a big bang, they're just going straight up. You want to make it like do it in phases. Let's start with this area. Let's find the best practices and benchmark with those best practices in general. In our full program, we're going to go into actual assessment. You will do assessment. We get questionnaires to um, analyze those assessments, get a scorecard after it also. Okay. Somebody said, how best should one handle a situation where one tends to avoid taking responsibility? Good point. So in reality, it depends on your role. If your role is to overall structure the governance and get people to be responsible for certain tasks, the key thing is you get the buy-in from your leadership first. So your leadership already allows and said, okay, and you don't want to be the jerk that will make them also mad and say, people do what they don't want to do. You have to take the time to socialize and explain the risk to them of why it's important. Most people are reasonable if you can take the time to explain the risk and why it's important. So you have to have a champion, right? If you are doing a project like this, the champion might be director of data management or VP of data management or whatever high level leadership is up there. They will be the ones to advocate and push for it. So you bait them, right? You don't want to be the face of pushing people to do stuff. No, you stay away from it. Yours is you give a neutral, independent opinion, you give it to your leadership, and they would champion it. You can help to guide once they've championed it, but you cannot be the champion. I mean, the face of it. Most times you want to use your top leadership to be the face of it, or else the project will probably not in the long term be successful. So that's what I think. The leadership buying must be a big piece of it. And this is just a quick component of data governance. At the minimum, in this section, you see our usual suspect. People, technology, and process are always there. But this is a good component of data governance in general. I'll keep this for just your knowledge I'll just focus on the ones that I think are big. Don't forget regulation also. Always remember that. Communication of the information at the end of the day. If you have an interview, this is a solid one to just hold and talk about. Data protection, the key performance indicators. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, don't let's make this bigger than what it is. We are saying the use of data is important in the organization. We all agree. That one, there's no compromise on that one. The next thing is, how do you keep the data, store my data? How do you apply regulations specific to the data itself? And how do you share it? Those are the key things I'm thinking at the end of the day, really. And we all know data at rest, data in transit, data in use at the end of the day. So other components around the data, I'm just saying the protection of the data, the technology you're using, the key performance indicators, how do you communicate or socialize it? What are the rules around the data? What are the regulations? What's the process? Who are the ones in charge of it? Those are the key fundamentals of data governance, really. That's what it is, to be honest with you. Those are the key things. Of course, there's some nuances depending on the project, what their goals are, but this is the gist of it at the end of the day. I challenge everybody on this call. It's one of those areas you can build a niche. The need is here. And if you position yourself right, of course, our GRC program is going to give you much more depth in different areas. But I like this because I see it as a space that you can build a solid niche and just keep improving yourself and your capacity in the long term. So, all right, let's move on. Again, I'll skip this. We already know what, our usual suspect people will be personnel, right? The data strategy, we talked about it. Also, I think we've repeated this one. The process around the data itself, the policies we build, the standard and rules around it, data security to ensure unauthorized users will have access to the data, encryption around the data, also communication on how we communicate to the internal and external stakeholders, socializing with the environment in terms of cultural socializing also. This is a huge piece, very hard to manage and measure at times, but they are huge in the scheme of things for us. The key metrics, how do we measure success at the end of the day? What technology do we use? Anyone on this call, when you remove data that is that you're not authorized to, they have DLP tools, they use data loss prevention tools that can track any one of us. So be mindful of that too. All right, the final one we're going to jump into would be GDPR. For some of us on this call, the old concept of GDPR, we'll just quickly talk about it a little bit. Then we would have like a breakout section to do some quick chat also. Do you have to be a data security person to be able to do this, or others too can do it? Most times you don't have to be a data security person, to be honest, to do data governance. There are people in security, whatever they call their title, they are still part of security, right? But the data governance folks are just, especially for big organizations, they provide that oversight to data itself. So they are more strategic in nature because they are not necessarily like a data security person. They use some tools they use to track information, yes, but you are more on the governance side of things. Okay. Does that answer your question? Does that answer your question, Carrie? Okay. Excellent. Thank you. What is GDPR? For those of us, remember, at the minimum, always remember that, is the privacy and security law governing organization worldwide that deal with people's data, the European Union members' data specifically. It applies to all over the world. If you are dealing with an European Union members' data, you must follow GDPR laws. The violations are critical and crazy. The fines are insane. So you don't want to mess with it. It can cripple your organization. So they are not playing. And there's a history to this. I'm sure most of us, during World War II, the Jewish community lost about 6 million Jews in Europe then. And one of the ways they were able to determine them was because they were getting their database from the hotels, restaurants, their properties, rentals. So they used that to trace them to kill a lot of millions of Jews, right? So because of that, that historic context made it important that not again, right? All over the world now, it's a big deal. European Union don't mess with privacy. In the US, we sometimes take it for granted, right? Because yeah, beside California, but now it's even getting much stronger and much restrictive here too. But in Europe, it's a big deal, crazy big deal. As a matter of fact, I did a project some years back, and I had to fly to Germany, Mannheim, because what I could have probably sent through regular email, I could not. I had to go in physically with a flash drive to install in the European Union location there, So because of some restriction, I had to, for me, it was fine, nice to travel, right, for that trip, but it was avoidable if it were not because of that law at that time. And it was early part in, the implementation phase of that law. I think then it was called Safe Harbor Law. I think that was that was the name then before they evolved to GDPR. So, but anyway, why GDPR? To curb crime, cyber crime? So that's a big one. The history of it, of course, we know it's the European Union. It was passed by European Parliament in May 25th, 2018. So it's been on for about 4 years. Yeah, 4 years. So it's a big one. Some key requirements for application of GDPR in organization outside of EU. You must be offering goods and services to people in the European Union. The organization monitors the online behavior of the citizen and resident of EU. If any of those criteria are met, then you have to comply to EU. If you are monitoring information and behavior of citizens in European Union, an example, if you have a SOC monitoring business and you are based in Caribbean, Africa, US, or wherever you are, and you're monitoring European Union data, you must be in compliance to GDPR. If you're processing information about European Union, you must be in compliance with GDPR also. So it's a big deal. There's no easy way around it. Of course, the scope is for EU residents and its citizens. So, and it applies to organizations that handles their data. Whether you're in Europe or not in Europe, it's still applicable to you. And this is just showing some of the territories in general. I think we talked about the scope already. Some key legal terms: personal data. This is any information relating to an individual who can be directly or indirectly identified. Remember, I talked about the story of the Jews. So the data mining data was used to identify or back identify people. So it does not matter if it can be used to identify people, we need to make sure that's considered a personal data. Data subject. These are people whose data are being processed. So if you are a resident or citizen of EU, you are considered the data subject, right? Let's take it again. Personal data, data subject, and finally, we have data processing also. These are the actions performed on the data itself, the processing process, the data processor, the folks that are acting on behalf of the data controller. Then finally, we have the data controller. So let's take it again. Data controller, can we all type this? Let's start with the data controller. So data controller would be like your, let's say, Amazon. Let's go, everybody. Let's type data controller, data controller. So they are holding all our data, right? Let's say Amazon, for example. Now let's go to data processor. Amazon is using a third party that is processing all their data. Let's say they're using PayPal. Let's say data processor, everybody. Let's go, data processor. All right. Now let's take it a step further. Of course, the processing is the act. Data subject would be the subject being processed. So let's say this would be the EU resident or citizen. Let's go. Then finally, please everybody type this. Let me show you what I said you should type. I said data processor, data controller, data subject. Please go ahead and type it. And finally, personal data. Personal data. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for typing that. Thank you. All right. So we're getting closer. We're getting closer. Then I'll make us do a little small group work. Then we wrap it up. Key regulation, key regulatory points of GDPR. Just in general, some key things to think about in terms of GDPR. We have the accuracy, accountability, storage limitation, integrity and confidentiality, purpose limitation, lawfulness, fairness and transparency, and data minimization. These are the key points of GDPR in general. You know, there are 7 points in general. So data limitation is saying it will only be processed for legitimate purpose. Lawfulness, fairness, and transparency says it will be used in compliance with law and fairness. Data minimization, it's going to be used for only intended purposes. Accuracy, of course, we wanted to make sure it's accurate. Storage limitation, it should be only stored as long as it's necessary. Integrity and confidentiality, we want to make sure the data controller ensure confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Then accountability, every GDPR compliance data controller must be able to show they're in compliance in general. So those are the key things. Data security, we talked about this earlier on, how our data is secure, how organizations should implement appropriate technical measures. Some would be like two-factor authentication, right? We talked about that point also. Some key things to just take note. Organizations are allowed to process data they should justify the following things. One, the subject gave them clear consent. Two, the data processing is necessary for executing or preparing for a contract where the data subject is a party. Three, that the data processing is required to comply with a legal obligation. Four, that the data processing will save somebody's life. Five, the processing is necessary for performing a task in public interest or carrying out some official duties. Six, the organization has a legitimate interest in processing someone's data. So many times, that's why if you notice in the US, when different investigation is going on, they would have to go to the court system to get approval and documentation before they process or get people's data. Very important also. Consent, as we know, we have to, if it's a minor, they have to have parental or guardian to consent before their information is used. And that's the summary in general of some of those key areas within the data privacy itself. So what I would like us to do real quick is for like 10 minutes, I would like us to, within the 10 minutes, I would like us to just talk in terms of what are some consideration you would probably make in terms of data governance for an organization. What are some considerations? So when I say consideration, think about the data and say, what would you consider if you are thinking of putting some governance around an organization? So let's keep it simple. So an organization, I want to implement some kind of structure around the way data is used. Tell me some consideration you would consider. Let me type the question again to the group. What are some key consideration you will recommend to an organization for data governance? Let's do that. So let me, I just typed it to the recommend, and I'll put it to the, let me quickly do this real quick. Let me stop recording.